But Zander, why don't we bring this gentleman on? We can't keep this guy waiting, and that is the host of the NFL Matchup Show, and and the national correspondent for ESPN, and I think was the author of How Football Explains America and Philly Special, Sal Paolantonio. Sal, how you doing?
Pat, happy 2025. This week in pro football just rolls on, Pat. I love it.
Does, Sal. I'm telling you, it rolls on.
You cannot stop this week in pro football, Pat Callahan.
No, Sal. That is a fact. That's a fact, Jack. I'm always willing to talk about the National Football League. So let's you and I do it. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's talk Eagles first, Sal, if we might. Just a word, if you would, Saquon. You and I talked earlier in the week about the decision to rest Barkley. You suspected this is what the Eagles were going to do. And you and I, in speaking earlier, we posited that once the Eagles pulled Barkley with 11 minutes to go in a game in which they were carving Dallas up, that was more or less sort of tipped the hand that they weren't going to play him this Sunday, right?
Yeah, they were celebrating with 11 minutes to go that he had 2,000 yards rushing.
Right.
One of only 9 players in NFL history to do that, Pat. So once that happened, it was pretty clear that the plan was not to play him against the Giants in Week 18.
Right.
But I believe that they were wavering a little bit at the beginning of the week, and that's why Nick Sirianni said on the radio that he was going to consult management and players and coaches. Right. I think there was a sentiment in the building that they should go for it. But in the end, the bottom line was this team has not had a bye for 12 weeks.
Right.
So it wasn't about only Saquon Barkley. It was about Lane Johnson. It was about Jordan Mailata. It was about the offensive line and getting them a bye because they're not going to have a bye.
All right.
So it gives them a week off. I think that was a key decision, the key part of this decision. The other factor was last year you went into Tampa in a wildcard game without A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
He got hurt the week before.
Yeah.
And that was a major factor in the loss. Now, you could say, well, they would have lost anyway. But if they had A.J. Brown on the field, it definitely would have had a different dynamic offensively.
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly true. And just to hammer home that thought, I think it's clear that had, in fact, Barkley run for another 50 yards in the last 11 minutes of that game, and he had only 45, 50 yards to go, Sal, I think they might jam him in there in that first quarter. But
you can make an argument that he has already had a better season than Eric Dickerson in 1984. So in 16 games with 345 rushing attempts, 5.8 yards per attempt,
right.
And Eric Dickerson had 379 in 16 games. He had 34 more carries.
Yeah.
So if Barkley had 34 more carries at 6 yards a pop in 16 games, he breaks the record.
That's fair.
Remember, Dickerson had 34 more carries in 16 games than Barkley did.
Yeah. Of course, Dickerson had Jeff Kemp at quarterback. I'm sure you remember that. But that was that's amazing. It's amazing Sally gained anything, but that's a whole other story now. We'll get to the Rams in a little bit because I do want to ask you something about them.
But I don't remember Jeff Kemp. I'll tell you the truth.
All right, Sal, let's get to the other injury that I think the Saquon debate kind of pushed to the back page, which I don't think bothered the Eagles at all, and that is Jalen Hurts, okay? He gets hurt in week 16 against the Washington Commanders and enters the concussion protocol. He is still not out. Give me your thoughts on the fact that Hurts is still there now, coming up on 2 weeks, Sal.
Yeah, moments ago, we just got the injury practice report from the Eagles, and Jalen Hurts is not a participant at all. So rather than recite the long concussion protocol for the NFL, I would invite anybody to go online and just Google NFL's concussion protocol. It's very involved. It's a 5-step complicated process. It's very specific. It was designed by the league and the NFLPA and physicians and consultants in concussions all over the country. And they came upon this particular protocol, and it so far has been working very, very well. And it's very difficult to get through it if you have these concussion symptoms. You can't game the system. You can't fool it. It's designed to make sure that the players are protecting themselves from themselves, and that in the end, the team does not have control over him getting back on the field. It's very,
Right.
I would invite people to, and if you look at it, it's pretty clear, just surmising, that he is still in the early stages of this protocol, because the latter stages call for him to be on the field.
Sal, as a matter of fact, you mentioned that 5 stages. You were kind enough to send them to me. For instance, number 4 is non-contact training drills. The player participates in non-contact football activities. Now, the fact that he was not a participant at all in practice, that means then he hasn't even reached stage 4. Is that right?
It could mean that, I mean, we just don't know. We don't want to guess, but it certainly seems that way. That once you reach stage 4 of the protocol, you can get on the field. And since he's not gotten on the field, we can deduce that he is still in stages 1, 2, or 3.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, that is something to keep an eye on. You mentioned the practice report. The Eagles had 5 guys not practicing today, and 18 were limited.
Right. Well, that's normal going into a week like this. The key is that Jalen Hurts didn't practice last week. He didn't practice this week. It looks like he's not going to practice this week because Friday's practice is very light. That's 2 weeks of practice.
Right.
So he needs to get ready for that wild card game.
Right.
A week from this weekend, he's going to have to get onto the practice field, and presumably on Wednesday. Wednesday's the install day. It's a walkthrough day. They don't do any heavy running. There's no contact. They walk through what they installed in the game plan offensively and defensively so they can visualize it on the field.
I agree.
Right? So if he's not on the field next Wednesday, then there's major question marks.
Right.
Major question marks.
Exactly. And even if he is, Sal, and I'm getting ahead of I know I'm getting over my skis here in terms of the timing, but as you pointed out in recent shows, what works in the read option the Eagles have is Jalen Hurts as a threat to run the ball. If he's late getting cleared and to play in that wild card game, might that not affect how often the Eagles trust him to run the ball?
Well, Pat, you would think so, and it's not highly speculative for you to ask that question. But I think what the Eagles proved against Dallas is that they could adjust the run game, and they could adjust it on the fly. So Mike Zimmer was bringing A-gap blitzes. He was blitzing on runs downs. He was bringing the heat constantly. The Eagles went into the game with some adjustments, and then they made further adjustments. They brought on C.J. Uzomah onto the field, backup tight end. They put him as an H-back. They had Grant Calcaterra already on the field, so they're in 2 tight end. There were some occasions where they had 2 tight end plus an extra offensive lineman. They went heavy against Zimmer's double A-gap blitzes, and that's how they were effective. Then they started to run on the edge, and then there's the wear down effect. This offensive line's size, speed, and power, and communication, and interlocking ability to open up holes is, in my view, second to none. I think it's better than Baltimore's, and they have a great running game. And I don't think there's anybody else that even comes close. So by the fourth quarter, after getting pounded by Lane Johnson going to the Pro Bowl, Cam Jurgens going to the Pro Bowl, Landon Dickerson going to the Pro Bowl. I mean, the whole right side of the offensive line is going to the Pro Bowl. These guys wear them down, and by the time the fourth quarter comes around, now Barkley's got that extra burst. Yep,
that's right. You see it week in and week out. And Sal, one other thing I want to ask you, Eagles, before the break here is the Eagles now, as locked in as the 2 seed, will get, assuming that they win the wild card game, 2 home games in South Philadelphia. Is there any venue in the NFL that competes with Lincoln Financial as an asset for the home playoff team like Lincoln Financial?
Definitely not. Not in January. Not when the sun goes down. No way.
Right.
It's rough. It's the concrete jungle. I misspoke, by the way. It's not the whole right side of the offensive line. Dickerson's at left guard. It's Dickerson, Juergens, and Cam and Lane Johnson. And I'll bet you Mailata is a alternate. He should be to the Pro Bowl. He grades out as one of the best left tackles in the NFL as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. And Becton, I mean, for a guy who did not play guard 8 months ago, ever, the way he has come in and been taught the system and the Jeff Stoutland way of Stoutland University is one of the great untold stories of this season.
Yeah. Stoutland has really, really established himself as
whatever they're paying him, they should triple it tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, listen, Sal, we get back. I want your expertise relative to these playoff seedings. I think it's very interesting. I want to question you about whether some teams, I'm surprised some teams are resting guys when I think they shouldn't be. I want to talk to you about that and also get your opinion on that Detroit-Minnesota game. We'll do all that with the great Sal Paolantonio. We get back here on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Kennedy Auto. Hi, welcome back here This Week in Pro Football on JAKIB Sports. Pat Callahan joining you along with the excellent Sal Paolantonio, the host of the NFL Matchup Show on ESPN and ESPN's national NFL correspondent. All right, Sal. With your permission, I will ask Zander to bring up this playoff seeding because I'm fascinated by a couple things, and I want to get your take on it because this is the week where coaches now, like we just talked about with Nick Sirianni, have to decide if they're sitting guys or not. Now, Saquon aside, Sirianni's decision was easy. They're locked into the 2 seed. They don't gain anything, so just do it. Unlike Dan Campbell, who just the hell with it. He just plays everybody all the time anyway. But if you look there, Sal, you see Eagles, Packers now, and then you got Rams and Commanders. Now, if Washington wins Sunday against Dallas, they are the 6th seed. They will beat Green Bay out. You see any trouble with Washington handling Dallas on Sunday?
I do not, Pat. I do not. And you know what? To me, Washington's a tougher matchup for the Eagles than Green Bay.
I think so too, Sal. I do. I think so too. I think the Packers, again, I think their passing game is seriously compromised. And I think Philadelphia would handle Jordan Love much easier than they would have to handle.
They have problems with Jaden Daniels, and specifically their linebackers couldn't handle his speed or elusiveness. They did a poor job of spying him. Of course, they were without C.J. Gardner-Johnson late in that game in Landover 2 weekends ago. But I think they would have problems with Jaden Daniels as a runner no matter what. In the fourth quarter, when defenses are worn down, that's when he seems to be running the most. You know, he has more rushes now than Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you wouldn't think of that. But there you go. All right, Sal, the one that interests me right now, of course, is my beloved Rams, who shockingly managed to beat Arizona despite the fact they had no offense at all Saturday night. Now, the Rams, in my opinion, sit now as the 3 seed, and they should do everything in their power to stay there. Because if whoever the 4 seed is going to play the loser of Minnesota-Detroit. So do you agree that the Rams should, in fact, beat Seattle Sunday so they avoid that and play either Green Bay or Washington?
Well, listen, I think the Rams are in a good spot at the 3 seed for sure. But they're going to have problems with Washington going out there. They're going to have problems with Minnesota. They'll have problems with Detroit. So, you know, their secondary right now is not really doesn't really match up well. They don't score enough points. They're going to have problems with any team that comes out there. You know, Stafford's going to have to carry the team. Stafford in that passing game, they're going to have to find a way to score points and carry that team. I think the number one team to worry about as a shocker is Tampa at home.
Yeah.
Tampa at home. Listen, you know, Baker Mayfield has thrown the most touchdown passes in the NFC. Number one, ahead of Goff, ahead of Darnold, ahead of Goff, ahead of Stafford, ahead of everybody. He's number one. Liam Cohen in that offense. And they have balance. They have third most rushing attempts in the National Football League. So they have balance on offense, something that Todd Bowles has salivated over for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that has helped their defense. It will be tough, no matter who goes in there, to beat Tampa in Tampa. I don't care who it is.
Sal Pal, let's stay in the NFC for just a minute. Talk about then Detroit and Minnesota. So Minnesota, with a gaudy 14-2 record, is facing the prospect of having to win in Detroit, or else they spend the entire playoffs on the road. Now, this is Sam Darnold. Now you're asking Sam Darnold. Now, he came through last week. I don't deny that against Green Bay. But as I said, I think Green Bay's suspect anyway. Now he has to go on the road in Detroit against a team that's almost invulnerable in that building. Tell me your thoughts on Vikings at Lions Sunday night.
Well, I think the Lions just scored too many points at home. They will blitz Sam Darnold from the get-go. Aaron Glenn will really dial up as many blitzes as he possibly can to get Sam Darnold off of his mark, take away the timing and rhythm of that Vikings offense, and they'll play man-to-man on the outside to make sure that Sam Darnold holds the ball a click or two more than he's used to. So they're going to come after Sam Darnold. And, the last time Detroit played the Vikings, it was week 7. It was a close game. But Jared Goff only had 3 incompletions in that game. He was 22 of 25. Right. 3 incompletions against Brian Flores in that defense of Brian Flores of the Vikings. That was in Minnesota.
Yeah, I was going to say that was on the road. Yeah,
I was in Minnesota. Yeah. It'll be a really tough environment. Sam Darnold against that crowd, against that defense of Aaron Glenn and the Detroit Lions. They will come after him. I like the Lions a lot in that game. The Lions are 5-0 in the division, but they've never won back-to-back division titles since 1952. That was the last time they won back-to-back. Not even you and I remember 1952.
Sad. That was only 72 years ago now. You're trying to say it's some sort of a trend. But 72 years since Detroit won back-to-back division titles. That's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But all right, Sal, let's look at the American Football Conference here. And I'm going to give you your props now. About 5 weeks ago, you were talking up the Los Angeles Chargers. And that was even before their quarterback has hit his stride, which I think he has done now. Yeah. That kid throws a ball, the most frozen rope, I think, in the NFL, Justin Herbert. Give me your thoughts. The Chargers, if they win, Sal, and Pittsburgh loses to Pittsburgh plays Cincinnati, I think. Do I have that right? Yeah, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, yeah. If Cincinnati was to win that game, then the Chargers could actually get up into the 5 seed. Give me your thoughts on the Chargers. Are they a live dog here in the AFC playoffs?
Oh, they are. They'll go on the road and they'll win their first playoff game. I think they have balance on offense. They have potential explosiveness to play. He brought over his defensive coordinator from Michigan, Jesse Minter. And, for the longest time, they were leading the league in points allowed. So they have a good, solid defense that's in the right position. They play good alignment, assignment football, just like Michigan. Michigan.
Right.
They're well coached. They don't make mistakes. They have good alignment, assignment football. They've had a couple of bad games, but not that much. And now Herbert has fit his. They will go on the road and win their first playoff game. The team that's the most intriguing to me in the AFC is the Broncos. The problem is the Broncos probably will have to go to Buffalo week 1 in the wild card, and that's just a dead end.
Right.
It is a dead end. It is.
Yeah. Denver, that's a shame. Sal, I'm just telling you, they blew it last week. They should have gone for 2. I know hindsight, there's no clarity like that kind of hindsight, but I think Sean Payton, you can't have Joe Burrow standing on the other sideline and not go for 2 there. And that's exactly what Sean Payton did. And that was a terrible mistake. But anyway, he's done a hell of a job.
He's done a great job. It's just it's terrible that they got to go to Buffalo because they're going to get waxed. They're going to get waxed by Buffalo.
That's a tough spot. That is a tough spot. You're certainly right. All right, Zander, thanks a lot for that playoff picture. Thanks, Sal. Just a couple more before I let you go here. I just want to get your opinion. I'm going to talk. Pat Leonard, from the New York Daily News, is going to join me.
The great Pat Leonard of Notre Dame University.
That's right. But I just want to run this by you. Thank God this conversation, this talk never happens here in Philadelphia, but a lot of talk about tanking in these towns like Las Vegas, in Chicago, or New England, and New York. And I'm dead set against it. I can't stand even to talk about it. with all the locker rooms and sidelines you've been in, is there any credible thought in an organization to not trying to win games in order to improve draft seeding?
Pat, it's not really something that I do a heck of a lot of thinking about, honestly, to tell you the truth.
Right. Yeah, I guess I don't either. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's just a conversation that certain media members love to have and get fan reaction on, but I don't think anybody does it within any building in the NFL. I really don't. You can tell by the way the Giants went out and did their business last week, and they were ecstatic about it. And I think that's the way the game's meant to be played. Sal, one last thing I want to ask you about is the window now is open, unlike in previous years, for assistants on playoff teams to interview for jobs. Now, the two Eagles coordinators have only been here for a year, but do you see any interest among the usual suspects on Black Monday who may be taking a look at some of the Eagles assistant coaches?
Well, Pat, Vic Fangio, he's an older coach. He's 66 years old. So I'm not sure whether or not, he'll have an opportunity to be a head coach again in the NFL. And certainly he's focused on winning a Super Bowl here in Philadelphia for sure, 100%, unlike some others that we won't mention by name. But I think, as for Kellen Moore, I think he certainly wants a shot. No question about that. And he certainly deserves to be in those conversations.
Right.
You got Liam Cohen in Tampa. You got Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson in Detroit.
Right.
So those are three names right there that I think are going to be getting a lot of interest from a lot of teams. And Kellen Moore certainly be on that short list 100%.
All right. And that's something next week I'll talk to you about when I use the term usual suspects because it seems to me, Sal, that it's the teams who keep turning over their front office and their coaches every year or every 2 or 3 years. They never get any type of, they never put down any roots on building a winning team. But we'll talk about that. So I know you'll be, this week, the matchup show. Are there any particular games you're focusing on?
Oh, yeah. We're focused on the 2 Saturday games in the AFC North for sure. And then we have a whole segment on Detroit and Minnesota. What a blockbuster final game of the year that is.
That is. That really worked out nice. Hadn't worked out nice for NBC. Certainly did. So that'll be fun to watch. And it's always fun to watch the matchup show. I urge everybody to do it. Sal Paolantonio, thanks very much for joining me this week. All right.
All right. Thanks, Pat.
All right. Sal Paolantonio joining me as he does every week here to talk about that. The Philadelphia Eagles and those playoff seedings. I think it's interesting. I think the Chargers could be a problem. Remember, it was only a couple of years ago. Chargers went into Baltimore and beat what I refer to as January Lamar. I don't think there'll be any player in the NFL in the playoffs under more pressure to go deep this year than Lamar Jackson. He shows it every year. He's an MVP. Probably going to win the MVP this year. But let's see it in January. We'll see about that. All right, listen, we get back. Buffalo Bill Reinhardt's going to join me. We're going to put a bow on this fantasy season, and thank God for that. We'll do that next on This Week in Pro Football, presented by Fantasy Guru.